Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. Down in Texas, I love Texas anyway, there's a company making some really good firearms, and then they've kind of sprawled out to do some other things, and they've really developed quite a reputation in making high-end ARs and other things. Joining me right now is the head guy over there, Mike Mihalski from Sons of Liberty Gun Works. Hey, Mike, how are you, sir?
Hey, Tom, it's good to talk to you again, man.
You bet. So, all right, first of all, back all the way up, how'd you get started doing this?
An end user in guns, grew up with the rifle in my hand my whole life, and was taught from a very young age that there's very little to be scared of if you have a good rifle by your side. You know, growing up in the woods, stuff like that. My dad, he's like, you are the apex predator. You have a good rifle.
Well, and you know how to use it, right?
100%.
So a good product, a good gun in your hand, and knowing how to use it. So that's a good foundation to start with. But then there are a lot of people who do that, but they don't build a gun company out of it.
I saw an area in the industry that we could plug ourselves into at the time. The way there was a few companies legitimately improving upon, like the Colt 6920, which is a really good rifle. I use the Colt 6920 kind of as a yardstick, right?
Okay.
And there were some companies legitimately improving on that. But if you wanted to customize that rifle in some way, you ended up with a bunch of parts on your workbench that you intended to swap out.
Sure.
So our goal was to just give the end user that kind of high performance rifle from the factory, tailored to that end user specifications.
Now, in the world of AR-15s, the whole platform, there is this spectrum from entry level all the way up to, I guess there's probably no top end on anything that you want to buy. But for a lot of people, they're going to start off with your entry level AR. And I wonder if the folks who are buying your rifles, Sons of Liberty Gun Works, probably not a lot of those are first-time buyers. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably accurate. People typically graduate to Sons of Liberty. I think they buy a rifle, they go out, and then especially if they're taking classes or especially if they're training or putting that rifle to any kind of demanding firing schedule, they'll realize that certain rifles are going to withstand that better than others. And that's typically where our customers come from.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of guns, you say, this is fine. I'm going to go out and shoot it 100 times a year. And a lot of things will do that. But if you say, I'm going to go take this rifle, I'm going to go fire 1,000 rounds this week at a class, you need something a little bit more substantial.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Some of the problems that we preemptively build to avoid will not manifest in 100 rounds a year. But if you're subjecting your gun to something more, they might,
So question. I'm sure you get this all the time. How is it, what goes into making a more robust, a higher end, if you will, AR?
I mean, materials, number one. I mean, materials are just, that's not an opinion. We talk about that stuff, if I say pepperoni pizza is the best, that's an opinion. If I say that 7075 T6 is twice as strong as 6061, that's a fact, So, when you get into, if you look at materials and certain things, processes, the testing, the technique, you're building to a very specific standard. And there's a difference between performance rifles and budget rifles. There's a difference between fighting guns, which is what we make, and competition guns. Both of them have their both of those things have their place, and but a fighting gun is just built a little bit different than, say, a competition gun. Both equally useful for their task.
Okay. What would you say is the heart of the AR? Where do you start if you say, I'm going to make a really good gun? Where do you start?
Well, I think every rifle begins life as a barrel, and you build the rest of that platform to support that barrel, right? So that if people took that approach to selecting or building guns, you'd probably be ahead of the curve. And by that, I mean materials, gas port sizes to control carrier speed, making sure journal and block tolerances are very tight, no hemorrhaging of gas, true chambers. And it just goes on and on and on from there. But that's probably not a bad approach to take when building or selecting a rifle.
The trend now, and the huge popularity of people building their own rifles, I think a lot of people get into it and then run into issues and going, this doesn't work the way I want. But a part of that is probably you're getting a clientele or maybe a population out there that now is understanding the things you're talking about. There's what we would call the esoterica of the little bitty things that make the difference.
Sure, and what I love is the rise in popularity of suppressors. So because of the rise in popularity of suppressors, when you plug that suppressor on the end of your rifle, it's either going to exasperate any weakness in that rifle, or it's actually going to increase the reliability of a good rifle. That's an interesting variable that was not as common before, right? So if you build every rifle and you anticipate that it's going to be suppressed, then you have to be cognizant of things like buffer weights and gas port sizes and extractor springs and some of these variables that really become important once you throw that suppressor on the end of the gun.
Interesting. I would not have thought of that. Now, I guess we probably ought to tell people, you sell, obviously, complete guns. You also sell a lot of parts, right?
Absolutely, and we sell a lot of training, too.
I was going to work my way to the training, too. Armor training. I mean, if you want to learn how to build these things, you actually are offering armor classes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a right way to do this kind of stuff. I mean, the torque values, the techniques, staking, you look at, testing stuff for understanding stacking tolerances. That's one of the bigger differences, I think, between like a home-built rifle and a factory-built rifle from a good, reputable factory is sometimes understanding stacking tolerance. Do we have a second to cover that?
Sure.
So you can look at, let's say, a gas block that might be in spec on the high side of the spec. And then you look at a gas block journal on a barrel that could be in spec, but on the low side of the spec. When you put those two things together, you have stacked those tolerances, and now you've created an issue. At home, if you have one gas block, well, there's a tendency to, let's do it.
Yeah.
At a well-built factory gun, you're going to take that one off and go pair it with something that is in spec at the same, the same end of the spectrum as the other component. And now you've eliminated that stacking tolerance.
All right. I mean, basically, every time you add something on, you can either make it better or you can make it worse. You can exacerbate the problem if you're running it right hard against the edges of the specs.
Right. And a more efficient gun, a gun that's where those little details have been adhered to, it's just going to push further than the gun that hasn't. I'm not saying your gun's not going to work. I'm saying if you were to just push those two guns to failure, one of them's going to go a little further. That's what we're building for.
Is it fair to say that for you, my sense is that you build guns for people that bet their lives on them?
100%. 100%. That the AR-15, in my opinion, is the best defensive tool that a civilian has access to, and that's the rifle. That's the gun I would be reaching for to defend my home. And if your approach to it is like that, then all those little steps may come into play, and it is. Your life could be on the line.
There you go. And now tell me about you got a training center also? What's the BTO range? I'm looking at your website here.
Oh, BTO, they're one of our partners that we do a lot of. Yeah, they're one of our biggest retailers and just one of our closest industry partners. We'll be teaching there here pretty soon. Amazing people. They're amazing people.
Good deal. The website is Sons of Liberty GW for Gunworks, sonsoflibertygw.com. You sell complete guns, sell parts, got training, you got a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of videos and information there. Mike Mihalski, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure, brother.
You bet. Look, holler anytime I can help, all right?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. You take care.